Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of a man.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is Year Zero, the show that revolutionizes personal engagement in the world and fortification of your life. Let's get to it. We're brought to you by Fox & Sons, foxandsons.com, the best place to get your BBC. I never start my day with anything less than BBC in my mouth, and I suggest if you like BBC, you go to foxandsons.com, get that big bold coffee, and put it in your mouth. foxandsons.com, promo code 0 at checkout for 18% off on any order $25 or more. That's foxandsons.com for that BBC big bold coffee. Put it in your mouth, baby. And the Marc Clair Show. If you enjoyed Marc Clair with Lions of Liberty, you're going to really dig the Marc Clair Show. Marc Clair has gone beyond the realm of politics to dig into the esoteric meaning of life in all sorts of different avenues, whether it be entrepreneurship, ghosts, goblins, Bigfoot, demonic entities, religion. Marc Clair is diving into all of it, and he's not afraid to tackle any task. So go check out the Marc Clair Show. Thank you, as always, Tom Burton, for the music. And you can find this show and many more at the Libertarian Institute.org. That's the Libertarianinstitute.org. That's where you'll find me, Patrick McFarlane, Scott Horton, Keith Knight, Will Porter, Kyle Anzalone, and a host of other writers like Kim Robinson. Go to libertarianinstitute.org and keep track of everything that we are doing for you. This computer. Cool. All right. I'm here with Mr. David Gornoski, formerly of a Neighbor's Choice and now of Things Hidden. What's going on, man?
How you doing?
I'm good,
doing
man.
Great.
I'm so excited to have this conversation. I think we're going to get like deep into some stuff and probably expand my own knowledge and understanding of what I'm looking at. And I think you have the perfect way of addressing these subjects.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to have this time and it's a privilege to speak with you. So I hope we can have a productive dialogue for the kingdom, huh?
Yes, sir. So I'm just going to dive right in. You've mentioned this, and I think Adam Patrick brought this up to you whenever you recorded with him. From the Bible starts in a garden and it ends in a city. And when it started in the garden, man was given dominion over the earth and the animals and all of wildlife. And I listened to Lord of Spirits podcast, so I've heard Father Stephen DeYoung. He makes these comments about how in the past in Christian history, the saints of yesteryear had taken over the temples of the pagans and reclaimed it for the kingdom, right? And whenever I heard you say it went from a garden to a city, that is exactly what I thought. You're retaking Cain's invention, Cain's dominion,
that's good,
and you're claiming it for God.
Yeah, right. Because we can't have that defeatist mindset where because the cities in our neck of the woods and our moment in history are relatively decadent and decaying and destructive and degenerate, therefore the concept of a city can never be beautiful and godly and wholesome. I mean, that's kind of absurd. And the idea behind, I think, the garden was that was the starting point by which they would build a city of God on earth as they were supposed to do, but they got caught up in a bunch of envy, right? They were coveting and wanted to imitate God in a rivalrous way, right? They instead you can imitate God in a non-rivalrous way or a rivalrous way, but that's the only option you have, those two choices in life. And so everything you choose is geared towards one or the other direction. They chose the rivalrous direction in imitation of the serpent, and it unleashed this kind of detour and difficulty that mankind has been wrestling with ever since. But yeah, so Cain is representing of kind of like, if you choose the path of rivalry with God, it's going to lead to a city founded on bloodshed. Cain kills Abel, and then after that murder, that's the starting point of the first city of mankind, right, as you mentioned. But then you have this story. It's interesting. When you immediately said city, I thought New Jerusalem, and then I thought Jerusalem when Jesus says, "Oh, Jerusalem, if you had only known the ways of peace," right? But now they've been hidden from your eyes. You've been blinded to the ways of peace, right? He says that in this climactic moment, a Shakespearean moment when he's looking from the Mount of Olives. He's looking upon the city and said, "Oh, Jerusalem, if you'd only known the ways of peace." And I think it's important to think about that. I don't think that was a statement made in like a patronizing abstraction, like, well, theoretically, no, I think he was actually saying you could have chosen the way of peace, right? The way of peace is what we were supposed to be doing all along from the beginning in the garden. And Jerusalem had a calling to initiate that way of peace in spite of its suffering and bondage, but it didn't want that. It wanted William Wallace Christianity, just like everybody else since pretty much wants William Wallace Christianity. And I understand it's a great movie and everybody wants that kind of a Jesus, but at the end of the day, it's not going to work. And Jesus was trying to help people see that, and he is helping us see it more and more. But in the New Jerusalem, that indicates to us that on earth, at some point in history to come, we are going to start to slowly, if we're not already to some degree, figuring out the ways of peace. And as we figure out the ways of peace, we'll get back to the project of building the city on earth, the kingdom of heaven on earth as it is in the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven. So we're going to take the unseen and we're going to take the ideal and incarnate it into concrete material reality in a kind of unfolding that we're participating in right now. So when Jesus dies on the cross and he completes his earthly mission at that point, he models for us the entirety of the future of mankind. Human beings in history, with Mount Everest down the road, will still be will get to a point in which their life choices are looking like the way Jesus acted. Yeah. And they will do greater things than him. That's a prophecy. That's a commitment. That's a vision that Jesus is going to execute. He's not going to fail.
I think part of our issue is that we judge the world and history linearly. And when you look at the prophecies, when you look at what Christ has accomplished, it's already done. And he said this, it is done. Like, it is finished. Like, we've done it. It's already done. And you can see the destruction of the serpent when Moses raises the serpent up on the staff, and when Jesus is hung on the cross and you look at his icon on the cross and he's serpentine across on the cross. Like, it's reclaiming that vision, that visual of the serpent is not this evil thing, and it doesn't have to be this evil thing. It's this complete domination peacefully and through sacrifice, and not like people are so quick to pull out a scapegoat and point the finger at somebody else. But right. If you take that upon yourself and you create within yourself a sacrifice, you're actually setting yourself up as a better example of how to move forward, because then you're taking that authority and that I call it masculinity. It's like true masculinity, and how Christ's life was the vision of true masculinity, showing men how to organize their lives, how to raise their families, how to lead. Follow me, he kept saying, follow me, and how to lead and take upon themselves that sacrifice and that responsibility.
Right. And that's a kind of living self-sacrifice, which is different from, say, the sacrifice of death, which is what humanity was bound up in before Christ completed his rescue of humanity on the cross. The ritual human sacrifice was the glue that bound society together, and people truly believed in the guilt of their victims. And just like now, there's people who truly believe in the guilt of their chosen scapegoat, Donald Trump or whoever it is, as truly the most loathsome human that's ever existed on God's green earth. And that is not the kind of mindset that Jesus would have us to have. He wants us neighbor rather than sacrificing our neighbor, and that's the key difference there.
So there's the discernment that you get whenever you come to a relationship with Christ, and there's this constant growth and discernment that you're experiencing and working within, and it's almost like you're being taught when to flip tables and when to be compassionate.
Right.
And what we see a lot of people like cling on to this Christian nationalism or looking for, the next, strong man like Caesar to pop up. And it's like, yeah, but I don't think that's what we're called to do.
Right.
I don't think that's what we're supposed to be looking for.
Yeah. People always want to be like Peter and be quick to take a sword out to defend Jesus, right? And that's still missing the point. And it's so hard for people to get that because they can't. It's like there's some kind of binary error code that humans tend to have where it's like, as soon as you say don't use force to administer the kingdom or defend the kingdom, they automatically jump to, okay, well, you're trying to take a pacifistic, losers, defeatist approach. It's like, no, we're not. How come people can't, straddle that balance there? And it's kind of similar, in my opinion, to the non-aggression principle, although it's not an abstract principle, right? Non-aggression principle is just kind of a derivation of Christian framework of looking at reality, kind of supplementally taking off into a different direction and not getting it fully complete, but getting aspects of truth pulled from it. But non-aggression plus non-vengeance kind of gives you a little bit more of a foundational framework of Christian ethics, in my opinion. But there's still room for self-defense. There's still room for cunning and being wise as serpent, gentle as dove. There's still that is still available in the Christian project, but it doesn't come with this kind of what I call pining for little Caesars. That's what you see on the right now. It's very in vogue. It's not fashionable to still be a champion of liberty right now because our liberties have been shred so fast and people are starting to say, wait a second, calling for kind of principled cutting of government, that's not going to happen. So therefore, no liberty, let's just bring in a king. They're desperate, and look, we see over and over again, the people of God in our Bible are constantly in a desperate state, demanding a hero, a king to save them. And it doesn't quite work out well. So I think we should just follow what God said and learn to be living sacrifices. And that entails, the fruit of the Spirit. And then the fruit of the Spirit connect with the actual vocation of what humankind was supposed to do. See, that's what's interesting to me. There is a kind of ascetic tradition that people are drawn towards in various tribes in Christianity, where it's kind of like death to the world, remove yourself, get out, get out, get out. And the problem I have with the way that kind of goes is, okay, you look at what, some of the folks that they're listening to and learning from who are talking about, mastering forgiveness, mastering humility, mastering the passions and so forth. But then you look at who they still want to lead them politically, and they're like, oh, no, that's the dirty field. We want a big Caesars for that, big bad Caesar. And I'm like, wait a second, your vocation for your individual sanctification should map very nicely with the collective sanctification of humankind, including the political framework and the social ordering framework that we employ to get along together. because our individual selves are not islands unto themselves. They are individually shaped by the desires around us. So this whole idea of like, I think it's a kind of dualism where it's like, okay, be a perfect saint one-on-one in your personal sanctification process, but then kind of get excited about a little Caesar coming along or that kind of authoritarianism for the polis part of our society. But those things are not disconnected. If you are learning to forgive a hateful neighbor 1,000,000 times over, then that should trickle up into how the political and social framework of dealing with a drug dealer would be. That should inform how we deal with a tax cheater. That should inform how we deal with other nations. That should inform how we deal with a whole variety of things. Not that there's no discipline or law. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it should leaven everything we do. You know, that nonviolent, self-emptying spirit that we are called to develop at a pietistic level on an individual level should inform our corporate collective mission of bringing, like you said, from the garden to the city.
And there's this, I don't know. I've been trying to like frame it, and it's kind of like the way I've kind of moved my podcast over the years as a personal revolution. That if each individual has this personal revolution where the person is continuing to grow, and you know you're stepping out of the boat, and you're trying to keep your focus on the goal, which is Christ, and you're getting distracted by all the things around you. And as you get distracted, you start to sink. And then you lift your eyes back up and Christ pulls you back up. But you have this ability, you just continue to get distracted. But that is not a reason to quit. That's a reason to continue moving forward. Because if you quit, you drown. And you don't want to drown. And if everybody quits at like aiming for that virtue and is pining for this strong man, this Caesar to come in and save them, then we're all going to drown.
Yep. And it's also, I think, helping you keep your mind on Christ. It helps when you realize that everything in our world that we've been given to do, not just Sunday and worship time, but everything is supposed to be under the dominion of Jesus, because all truth and all beauty and all goodness and all creation is his, right? And so it's if keeping your eyes on Christ is keeping your eyes on reality, then everything that is real and good is part of keeping your eyes on Christ, and keeping that in mind helps to keep you going, right? So if you're thinking, well, keeping on my mind on Christ means picturing how he looks in imagery and visuals, and just thinking of his beard and everything, and like staring at that in his eyes and stuff. Like if you take it so that it doesn't allow itself to inform what he created us to do, right? God didn't create us in the garden with every tool available for us to subdue the earth in a loving, cultivating way. He didn't have us do that with the intention of having us sit around by a tree and closing our eyes and imagining what God looks like and what his son looks like. You know what I mean? And like, oh, I want to be holy like you. He didn't have us doing that. He wanted us to literally make this place his home. And so if that means you're a carpenter or a farmer or whatever it is, that everything about your vocation is saturated with symbolic meaning about God, attributes of Christ. And to do those things in a glorious and beautiful way is part of, and really is the primary vocation of what you're supposed to do, creating. You're supposed to create. That's how you touch your kind of being in tune with your divine maker, is when you create and when you make things. And I think that's important for a nation that has lost its way in entrepreneurship and making things and craftsmanship and farming. We need to rediscover making things again as the primary framework of our society, not just the service economy. It's no wonder that a service-based imperial economy is detached from the incarnational truth of Christ, because Christ is always, trying to challenge us to make things. And that could be little things, it could be big things. making things is something, and that obviously you will need service jobs and so forth to support making stuff. So we don't want to denigrate anything, but everything should be geared towards producing stuff and cultivating things which are beautiful and serving others around us. So what do we do? You mentioned the serpent, but the serpent, that snake on the bronze snake on the pole, eventually apparently was repurposed as a false idol for human sacrifice. Remember?
Yeah.
And the Israelites, they got a hold of that thing and they started burning incense and doing sacrifice to it, as well as to Asherah poles, which were also forms of human sacrifice kind of conduits. So they had to destroy, the King Hezekiah, I believe, had to come in and destroy that snake thing that Moses had made, which originally was a good thing, now turned into an instrument of evil. And what is the evil? It's the human sacrifice part, right? Mm-hmm. So when you get to think about that, what you said there, I'm just pulling that a little bit further. When you get to the story of Jesus, you said that he kind of reclaims that snake on the cross, but you have a fake Jesus there in the text too, Barabbas, right? Mm-hmm. And so you kind of see they're repurposing that idol, that Jesus, there's a false Jesus that the crowd chooses, in the name of Yahweh. They did it in the name of Yahweh. They chose Jesus Barabbas, the guy who we think is Jack the Ripper growing up. He's just some guy running around killing people. No, he's this revolutionary. He's a figure like William Wallace, just like Peter wanted that, and Judas wanted that. They all wanted something kind of like that, except for some of the establishment. But, they're looking for this, and the crowd says, no, we want, in the earliest text, I've pointed this out, that Barabbas's name is listed as Jesus Barabbas, Bar of Abba, the Father. So you have two Jesus, son of the Father. Which one is the real one? Which one will humanity embrace, and which one will humanity, kill? And they kill the one that's from God, and they kill and they love and embrace the one who makes God in their image, which is the crowd, right? Mm-hmm. So you can see all of religion is deconstructed in that one crowd choice. Not only is religion deconstructed, that the gods that humanity loves are really just projections of the crowd's need for violence to propitiate its jealousies and stress. But you also see politics deconstructed in that moment too, because Pontius Pilate, symbolizing the majesty of the empire, has to bow to the crowd because he doesn't want to kill the guy, but the crowd is like hungry for it so much that he has to submit to their will. So it shows you that everything, the governments of our time, of our world, and the religions of our world, including ones that try to pretend to be of Jesus, oftentimes it's really a projection of the crowd, of the collective spirit.
Yeah, Jesus was trying to steal their democracy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Their democracy decided he was going to have to die,
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And we choose that. We typically choose that kind of Jesus in all of our choices. Most of the time, we choose the William Wallace Jesus when we cut someone off in traffic, or we're mean to somebody for petty reasons, or we don't forgive people. We're still choosing the kind of, I got to get mine. I got to get my. You hear Christians, unfortunately, conservative Christians in America, oftentimes like to mock turning of the cheek. Have you ever heard that? They'll say, we've had enough of this turning of the cheek stuff. I'm thinking, you guys haven't even tried it. I mean, what are you talking about? You had enough. But it's just, you voted for John McCain. That was turning of the cheek because he used flowery rhetoric to murder people by the thousands in his career with all these wicked wars. I mean, come on, that's not turning of the cheek.
Well, yeah. They view humility as a weakness, but none of them are strong enough to try it.
Yeah. That's well said. None of it. True humility to the point of losing one's life for the truth, and for people who are mean and petty, that's very hard.
Yeah.
How many people really want to risk everything for people who don't even care about them, or,
Yeah.
I mean, there are people, in life, you'll meet people who are just petty and mean, and they just want to stir trouble up and stir drama up. And just imagine like giving up everything you have, including giving up the lives of your children for those people. I mean, that's the hardest thing in the world to do. And that's you can imagine that's what God had to go through, right? Giving up himself and giving up his own sun in some sense, in this kind of mysterious way that people have tried to make theories about.
Mm. Yeah, and it's hard to get in the Western mindset is so disconnected from the story as it originated, that it's almost hard to have these discussions with people, because they're like, they'll just come out and you'll be like, well, yeah, you got like words right, but the facts are wrong. Like what these words mean or meant in this context, the way that you're interpreting it isn't correct. And they're just like, oh, that makes no sense to me. And it's
right.
It's like, it doesn't make sense to you because it's so separated from the way that we live our lives today.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that's the thing that I've tried to do with the work I've done, which is to say, can I take the work of what Jesus is doing in his life and in history and in our current events and make it come alive like I see it? I see it as, of course, this is what's supposed to be going on, because once you like understand the stone the builders rejected, that whole motif, that becomes the cornerstone. That's the only thing that makes sense for why it is that someone like Trump, the more indictments he gets, the more powerful he becomes, right? This is the Obi-Wan thing. If you strike me down, I would become more powerful than you could possibly imagine. I mean, where does that come from? That's not, so you have to understand kind of the anthropological impact of what's going on in the Bible and what it does to our world that we've inherited 2,000 years later, in order for you to grasp kind of why current events look the way they do. And once you see the pattern of it, it starts to make sense. It starts to be alive. The whole world is alive with, meaning,
Mm. Well, you talk a lot about like the best wine comes at the end of the wedding, right? And you've talked about this story several times, Jesus's first miracle, bringing out the best wine at the end of the wedding, and how the greater things are still to come. But see, in our society, especially like with the presidential election every 4 years, right? It's like, as soon as that's over, it's like, we arrived. And there's no pursuit of greatness, of getting better. And we do that in our own lives too. We don't only do it politically, we do it in our own lives. And this is why I focus so much on the personal revolution, because your own life is a microcosm of the way that you engage with the world and what you expect out of the world. And so we'll get that promotion, and then we relax, or we get married and we stop caring about our spouse, right? We stop paying attention, right? And it's not that I've perfected any of these things. It's that I'm always striving to be better, because it's like, I know I haven't arrived. I know that anything I have in my life at this particular moment can slip directly through my fingertips if I am not consciously aware of that. I have to make it better. It has to keep getting better, because it's that pursuit of greatness and that pursuit of a better tomorrow that engages your mind and your spirit into the reality of the world that's in front of you.
And I find that on the personal level, that sometimes you can neglect things to pray about on a fervent level, because at least for me, I've almost felt like, and I know it's an error, but it feels like, well, if I really keep that passionate prayer life of urgency, it somehow associates in my mind with the pain of anxiety. You know what I mean? Like, because if you're really passionately praying all the time about all the different things in your life that need healing or fixings, and this person's suffering and that person's suffering, and this needs to fix, and that, and if you feel like if you give it all a lot of attention, you're almost afraid to have that kind of fervent, passionate, urgent prayer life on a regular basis, because you feel as if, well, that's going to be wrapped up in anxieties and I don't want to think about them. So you kind of let them numb out, right? Let those anxieties kind of dissipate from your conscious mind. But then that somehow comes with not praying about them as much. So it's hard because when you do pray for things, it has a way of getting worry away, right? Why worry when you can pray, that little slogan. But but it's almost like the mindset that you need to stay in sometimes to be so urgent and very and not dispassionate in your prayer, right? Because it seems as if God really, he really likes it for some reason when you're really passionate about your prayers. And you almost feel like, I don't know if I have the emotional and mental capacity to stay in the level of fervent passion that seems to be his favorite. Do I have the energy for that? But I guess you just have to try and keep going.
Well, I think part of it too is the constant like showing that we're not worthy. And it doesn't matter if you're worthy. Like your worthiness is not necessary. Like whenever last Sunday we go through the verses in the gospel where Jesus is like, if you do not love me more than your brother, your sister, your wife, if you're not willing to sacrifice all these things in my name, you're not worthy of me. And it's kind of like this idea that like you're never going to be worthy. Like there's like, quit trying to be worthy, just keep pursuing. Right. And Father Michael had said last week, which I found it like to be so beautifully said. He's like, but if you can tear yourself away from that fervent like defense and grasping of the material world and those people that are materially part of your life and loved Christ more and beyond what you love those people, they will experience more of your love than they will ever know if you keep pushing Christ away, which is something I find, right? I find myself doing because I come from an agnostic background, and it was never like part of my life to be engaged in prayer and in seeking God, that I will find that I will stay up and sit at the kitchen table and just spend time with my wife instead of pursuing that. And I'll wake up the next morning, I'll be like, man, what was I doing? Right? Like, why didn't I do what I was supposed to do last night? I know I should have gone and prayed, but I was like, oh, I'll get to it. And then by the end of the night, I'm like, I'm just going to bed, and it's like, but it's not that. It's that just to continue and to press and push and walk and to keep that discipline and mindset at the front of your mind so that you know what you're supposed to be doing. And all you have to do is do it. And it can be uncomfortable and it can be awkward and it can be different and it's out of the ordinary and you're breaking habits that you've always had your entire life, but you just keep pursuing it. And therefore, in by doing that, the people that you want to show appreciation and love and affection to experience it like threefold, sevenfold, 77-fold, because it is perfected through that relationship. Right.
Yeah, no, I see what you're getting at there. And I think it's true. I think you have to, that's what it means to daily try to imitate Christ, and it's true that when you imitate the mindset of Jesus and the actions of Jesus, it tends to make everybody in your orbit more joyful and more at ease and more it has a mimetic impact, right? It has a mimetic orbiting or a magnetism. I like that word, it has a magnetism towards it. It'll draw you, behold, I will draw all men unto me, right? And so when you're imitating that one, you will draw people towards you typically. Now, the problem is don't idolize that, because even Jesus was betrayed and murdered. And that's something that I think we're always worried about, which is why we don't fully imitate Jesus, right? Because we feel that, for example, I'll give you an example. I think the system we have for housing in this country is diabolical. And I think, the whole concept of debt and the compounding interest that's basically involved with mortgages and things, I think the whole thing is ridiculous.
Right.
Especially when we don't have honest money and we have, all the gimmicks, fiat currency, fractional reserve lending, all these little gimmicks. And then people are supposed to be buying a home now. If you're a young family, you got to be what, $500,000 in debt in this volatile, inflating economy. So you're basically setting yourself up like those movies where the water keeps rising, you know what I mean? And you're about to drown and it has to stop it before you succumb to the water level. Like, this is a diabolical system. This was not what Christians should have signed up for, but they have been signing up for it and going along with it for decades. And people who are realtors and homeowners and all these different things, they're all just participating in this evil because they say, well, everybody else is doing it. What else are you going to do?
Yeah.
But it's all evil, and it needs to be called out as such, I think, in the pulpits. I think it needs to be talked about in Sunday schools. I think people need to understand this is not the way it's supposed to be. You're not supposed to be getting this much interest and with the threat of eviction for a young family to get started. You know, like the Amish figured out how to do a more humane system. Surely we could start figuring out how to do a more humane system than waiting for Big Daddy satanic government to do affordable housing or whatever gimmicks they're going to do to benefit Wall Street. Right. So, you know, like that's a wicked system. And I think if we're really truly imitating Jesus, that's what I'm saying here. That's why I think it's important to not make it pietistic to the point where it's detached, right? Because you can have this kind of fervent prayer life where you're really kind and loving to everybody in your church, but yet you're a ruthless person using debt and usury to make your money.
Right.
I mean, you can't compartmentalize. These things need to be redeemed. That's what it means to baptize nations. A baptized nation knows what honest weights and measures is. You know, a baptized nation knows what is an ethical way of dealing with violent crime and what is a rape cage. Okay. Christians don't support rape cages. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's different ways to handle that, you know, and these things should be able to be talked about in Christian circles so that, because I think there's this feedback loop that when you don't recognize how that personal piety should translate to social and business and neighborly obligations, it creates this feedback loop in which there's more scandals to trip you up along the way. Like fatherlessness. Fatherlessness is a huge scandal.
Yes.
Right? And there's a collective system here, you know, where you talk about all these different things that are all bound up in our society that are holding us back from being able to fully, you know, realize a holy life without having constant stumbling blocks, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been divorced twice, and I'm still going to be one of the first people that will tell you that divorce is evil and it is devastating to children. Like, and I understand that I participated in it, and I've been in, you know, on both sides of it where I filed and I've been filed against. I get it. But I've never claimed to be perfect, but I do look back and go, oh man, why, you know, like that, the devastation, especially when you look societally, you know, and you see that how I call it a crisis, the single mother crisis has created such violence amongst boys because they don't have that strong masculine, you know, person like setting the example for them and showing them how to be Christ-like. And I'm turning back to something I said earlier, but I really think that was a major thing that Christ did, was he set a truly masculine example for men to imitate and how to lead families and how to lead their lives and how to engage with the world. And if we were taught that from a young age, that this is what we are being taught, not only about the Son of God and salvation, but we are being taught how to live and how to be men and engage with the world and really study what he did and how he lived his life and how he led his disciples, quote unquote, his family, through the chaos and brought order out of that chaos. We would all be much better for it.
Yeah, totally. It's the art of manhood and the age of female narcissism. That's something that, and everybody struggles with these things of ego and all this, but the culture has a certain flavor to the age. We all know it. Right. And it's one that disfavors and tries to penalize masculine form of love and different things versus, and tries to criminalize it and stamp it out as like a crime against humanity to like have a backbone and to delay gratification. That's a big issue, right? in this culture of feel good narcissism where it's like, if you don't give whatever is wanted immediately, that's considered a violent thing.
The defense of the passions.
Mm-hmm.
I think I heard Jonathan Pajot say to you, it's we live in a society that defends the passions.
Yeah, that's
and rejects morality.
Right.
And I think it was you that said you had said something a while back. I think it was you. It might have been somebody else. Like sometimes I get my conversations confused, but I heard somebody say the other day that the reason that we're seeing the feminist movement, the third wave feminist movement, be so reactive against the patriarchy isn't because the patriarchy is so abusive, but it's because men have so failed at their roles that women feel like they have to step up and be the authority.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it's one of those things where, and you can see how in politically correct culture, more old-fashioned forms of masculinity are allowed if one has enough victim points.
Yeah.
and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
So you can have, and that has a lot of different applications, but you can see it that in Europe and other places, somehow all of a sudden, like even vicious and very bad and violent forms of masculinity are able to be smuggled in as long as it's victim points layered on top of it as a kind of excuse. So like, well, we can't expect X to behave a certain way because of their victim identities.
Right.
And therefore, it's like you get to have your cake and eat it too. You get to be a raving feminist while also embracing.
But don't be Daniel Penny.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the double standard there. Right. And the thing that people who are concerned with this kind of chaos, the only way you can break free from that is to do a kind of the things that men do to stop chaos, which is to create order. And how do you create order? You have to create beautiful things that are lasting and that work.
Mm.
Okay, so what works? We need to have energy too cheap to meter so we're not reliant on the grid. Mm-hmm. We need to have food, highly dense nutrition with deep, rich soil so that we can get it locally, so that we can support wealth in our local community instead of it all going mediated to Wall Street. Okay.
Right.
In DC. So we need to restructure, and that's something that men can strategize and coordinate in the market and in academia or academia and outcast, which is the podcast world or whatever. We have to be able to think these things through. We need to have salons, not where we get our hair did, but where we think and we create and we strategize and we brainstorm and we throw things on the wall. What's the best chicken type to raise?
Right.
What's the best one for meat? What's the best one for eggs? Is there differences in regions? Is there differences, is there one variety that's really good in this region and one variety that's not? And what's the best way to feed them? Can we reduce linoleic acid in the chicken feed so that we can have eggs that are not as rich in this toxic amount of linoleic acid that we've been poisoned by the vegetable oil industry? So, you should eat like no more than 3 grams of like omega-6 a day, according to the late great Dr. Ray Peat, who is a great scientist who was into nutrition in this way. And yet, most of the chicken eggs, even they're cage free or free range or whatever, you eat 3 or 4 of them, you're past that range already in terms of the grams of the toxic level of vegetable oils, which is driving inflammation. It's driving hormonal disruption. It's driving endocrinal. I mean, how much of what our society has done is messed up because of our endocrine system is jacked and screwed up. And so all of these layers have to be put under the framework of the spiritual, but they can't be neglected, right? I mean, God gave us a mind for a reason. And the idea of, well, let me keep eating arsenic and there I'll pray the poison away, that's kind of stupid. Like, we're supposed to use our mind. We're supposed to say, okay, so we got a huge uptick in mental health issues. It could be this, and this. what are the things that we can start removing? Okay, let's remove the vegetable oils. Let's remove high linoleic acid chicken eggs. Let's start raising local chicken feed. Let's not use corn and soy. Let's not use sunflower oil, because I've seen some of them, they'll say corn and soy free chicken feed, and then they've got sunflower oil as the first ingredient. So that's more linoleic acid than the corn and soy. So you're jumping from the frying pan into the fire of vegetable oil. So you don't want that. So, thinking critically through these things, that's how you build society. Everybody keeps saying we need to have our own institutions. We don't need our own institutions. That's a mental asylum. We need to have people getting together and thinking creatively about, how are we going to feed our chickens? How are we going to raise our chickens? What chicken variety? How do we distribute these foods, right? How do we get the cost effective for people so that they don't have to pay obscene amounts, hopefully? And how do we create a system where a currency has some value and has some stability so that you don't have to gamble your life away in the casino economy and Wall Street to be able to have a retirement? You shouldn't have to do that. That's an unethical society.
Yeah.
All those things, Jesus cares about those things. It's not an afterthought to him. He really wants us to think about those things,
Yeah, no, you're completely right. You got my mind, and I like reaching back for an old story from probably about, I don't know, 6-7 years ago. But I remembered seeing this, and it kind of, it almost, I guess the only way to say it is it terrified me. It was just like, what is going on? And it was this farmer, he had been growing crops and he had been selling them locally at the farmer's market, and he built a brand and built himself up and started making good money. And then Monsanto sued him because the seeds that he had been using, they had rights to. And so basically their argument is, because we have the rights to these seeds, we have the rights to all your profits.
Wow.
And so I'm thinking, like, what if they're doing that with like chicken feed, and they're putting specific things in there that somebody has the rights to, right? They have the copyright, the patent to, and that as farmers like sell eggs, then as a farmer starts building a bigger brand for himself and selling more eggs, and maybe getting some of his farm fresh eggs, his yard eggs, in the local stores, the local grocery store, the mom and pop shop up the road, whatever, then this company comes and sues them. And it's like they've strangled it. And it like you said, it's unethical. They put a stranglehold on your food. Like, you can't even compete in growing food locally for your community. Monsanto has the rights to that. They have a stranglehold on that business, and it's insane.
Right. Yeah, but you have to go back to things that are not patentable, I mean, if it's order forms of feed that are not, trademark, copyrighted, patented, proprietary, you have to go find them and start using them and figuring out how to rebuild from where you can. And maybe you're not a farmer, or maybe you want to do something else, but we need to be strategizing and having salons where we work together and say, okay, you're an engineer, you're a chemist, you're a marketer, you're a lawyer, you build your community up and work together to build things that are beautiful in a strategic way that serves your fellow human being. That's what you're supposed to be doing anyways. That's what you were always supposed to be doing. Yeah. And we've lost that because we've become a decadent empire, and a disembodied Christianity is easy to beat at that point.
I think, and I don't know, maybe I'm a little white-pilled or too optimistic on this particular subject, but I think that's kind of what's happening with the Orthodox Church. It's becoming the lodge. It's becoming the place where the creative minds that have been looking for answers and looking for truth are starting to come together and find their way to not only Christ, but to each other, to create these communities.
Yeah. It's important.
It's not a fast process. I mean, it took thousands of years to destroy it. Like, it's going to take a long time to rebuild it.
Yeah. It's important. I wanted to say something else about this topic. It's important not to blame everything on devils and demons too, because I was listening to one exorcist. I've interviewed a few of them, and one of them said recently, he said something to the effect of, the devils don't necessarily give the mental illness, but they'll do kind of like what your mom says, don't pick your scab, let it heal. And so what the devils would do is they'll come along and they'll scrap at that wound that you've had, right? From a trauma or someone, human evil did it, or you're evil, or, or something like that, mental health issues, they'll scrape on that wound and get it more inflamed and get you fixated on it. And I thought about that. I'm like, that's a metaphor too, also for so many of the problems we have. Instead of saying the devil made me do it, a lot of the things that we have, again, if we use our heart, soul, and mind and let every thought be kept. Like once you understand that, like vegetable oils didn't happen in a vacuum, they came from our theology. You see what I mean? Your theology will impact your society, because the idea of religion and society are synonymous. Those are synonymous words, really. They're the binding agents of our communities. So whatever the culture is and religion are all synonymous with what your society is going to look like. And so like when you have people coming around saying you don't need butter, you need an industrial new space age vegetable oil, that's basically kind of a Tower of Babel moment where man's hubris says we'll build a tower of perfected oils for our food that will surpass what God allows natural fats to be like, which is more saturated. So they start demonizing saturated fat. Dwight D. Eisenhower has heart problems. They have cigarettes and butter. They blame the butter and they get them to eat the vegetable oils, right? Procter and Gamble at the time, or I think was it Procter and Gamble? Yeah, that was selling this cigarettes, and I think they also sold Crisco, right? So Crisco was this nothing new little, it was a waste product, and it was this new product, and they needed to promote it. And so at the American Heart Association was a little upstart group with one little office with one room in it. And basically they come along to Crisco comes to them and says, look, we'll put you on the map. We'll write you a check. You'll be on airwaves everywhere. American Heart Association recommends, as long as you back Crisco. And so they pushed these vegetable oils. This is the Tower of Babel moment.
Yeah.
So instead of being know nothing Christians where I got my Jesus, that's all I need. No, if you had Jesus, and it doesn't mean everybody has to be a genius, but your pastors, your shepherds, the people involved in leadership in your church communities at least should be informing you, hey, we can't do Crisco, guys. That was a Tower of Babel move. And I know it's cheap, but guys, try to use something that's similarly priced, but healthy. So you're not poisoning us every Sunday to the glory of God. We don't want our mitochondria dying in the name of Jesus. We don't have time for that. If Jesus wants us to suffer the cross, he'll give us that opportunity. We don't have to come up with creative ways to do it and pat ourselves on the back thinking that we've made a healthy choice like we did for switching to margarine for so many. But you see what I mean? There's so much error that comes from wrong theology.
Well, it's like we were talking about earlier. It's the genius is the person who is most creative at finding a scapegoat. That's really like what it is. Sure, it's like, they have to scapegoat. Like I always laugh, and I have for years, because you buy like almost any product and it'll say this product is known to cause cancer in the state of California. And it's like, well, I'm going to stay out of California because I don't want to get cancer, because everything causes cancer according to the state of California, and so it's like, it's just, they
put that on those trans books for kids that they publish from California. This product is causing cancer.
This product is known to cause HIV by the state of California. No, I'm playing. That constant scapegoating, like the man is, and this was something I was thinking about the other day. Maybe you have like some kind of insight into this, because I can't imagine a world any other way, because it's so ingrained in where I've been for 43 years. And it's like, it was something I was really contemplating, right? So Milton Friedman used to say that when goods cross borders, armies don't. And so the liberal order created this world economic system to where nothing is produced in the United States anymore, and everything's produced overseas, and it's all trade back and forth. And I was like, what would it have looked like had that not have happened? Like there would have still been trade because there were still resources that are available in some places, not available in others. You still would have had that going on, but it wouldn't look like you wouldn't have the United States as a pure consumerist society, whereas everybody else is producing things. There would still be production here. Would that have saved the Rust Belt? Would that have saved the middle class? Would it have lowered the potentiality of advancing for the wealthier? Right? Would they have had a harder time advancing their wealth and creating more income on their behalf? Would it have created a more equal kind of system across the world to where one country isn't the economic superpower?
I think so. Yeah. I think if we had followed Christ, so I think that the idea of trading in theory, right, is a Christ-like thing, instead of having war.
But they inverted it. Oh, we froze. Uh-oh.
If you have something very obscure in your country, right, that's what I'm saying, that they inverted it. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good now. I got you.
So yeah,
I thought you had stopped. That's why I said they inverted it. And then I saw like, oh no, his face isn't moving anymore. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is that like I think they corrupted the Christian universal vision, right? And they corrupted it with coercion, which is what man does. They take a shortcut to heaven that leads to hell on earth, right? So they're like, oh, universal brotherhood. We can do that in a natural kind of free-flowing way, or we can do it in a corrupted, managed, controlled way, and they chose that path and they keep choosing that path.
Yeah. Well, you brought up usury earlier, and that's mentioned in the Old Testament, like and that's basically the system that we live under is like global usury.
Right. Yeah. And honest weights and measures is mentioned in the Bible, and that would preclude having a currency like a fiat currency and having fractional reserve lending where banks can lend you $10 for every dollar they have, and then they can charge you a higher interest than they get. And it's all by law. It's a violent imposition of an oligarchic system. And if you could do a lot of what ifs, like what if the moral majority, remember with Falwell and Pat Robertson, the good old days of that era, people, I'm sure you probably didn't think those were good old days for you when you were young. And that
my grandma loved watching Pat Robertson.
Yeah. But imagine imagine if they were really awesome and like consistent instead of being kind of like warmongers and owned by the neocons. Imagine if they had been like, look, we've got to talk about the Federal Reserve System, at their rallies, and imagine if they were talking about honest weights and measures and having real money and real things like that. Imagine them talking about, hey, look, we can't have our system based on, like Social Security and Medicare for our elderly. We need to have a system that supports people without using government largesse programs to take care of the elderly. That would have created an environment in which we were more attached to our elders. We were more attached to their values and lessons, and we were able to love and give into their lives more, as opposed to breaking it up like it's become atomized in our society today. So like all these things we can do them. You can run the tape of history back and say, man, if we had followed the ways of peace, like Jesus said, oh, Jerusalem, if we had only known the ways of peace, but now they've been hidden from our eyes. And that creates its own destruction. It sows destruction.
Yeah,
and that's the thing we're seeing
from
today.
our eyes. Yes. That's, now that you say it a second time, yes, been hidden from our eyes. That's like so true, because like we can't even imagine another system. Like we look and we're like, it's the United States of capitalism or the United States of socialism. Yeah. And it's like, no, it's neither of those.
Yeah.
It's neither of those. That's not, neither of them are right.
Yeah. And that's why I've tried to focus people's attention on big, exciting, aspirational things that are still practically needed to get Christians to focus their framework on. Like I've spent a lot of time poking at physics and establishment physics, because that's the holy of holies of our materialistic world, right? I mean, that's the high. I mean, there's nothing more rarefied as a science, scientism as a religion. There's nothing more rarefied in that world, both the scientific profession and the scientism religion that we're owned by in our Western society. There's nothing more rarefied than physics. Right. And when you realize that so many of the settled status quo dogmas of the field are not determined by really the evidence really concludes that, but rather it's mimetic prestige, right? It's people saying, oh, this icon has already established this and it hasn't been challenged for over 50 years. So therefore, as a young physicist, there's no way I have any kind of professional standing to even begin to explore or test against that. For like quantum physics or relativity, you're not allowed to question these things. These things are calcified into stone by mere mimetic inertia, right?
I've noticed that with gravity, because I remember hearing somebody come out a while back saying, well, I don't know if Einstein's theory of gravity was absolutely correct. And I think he was on the precipice of something, but I don't think he discovered it. And suddenly the dude just disappeared. He just shut up. Like you never heard from him again. It is crazy.
Yeah. And I'm not even saying there's some kind of, conspiracy or anything going on. I'm saying it's human nature to socially scapegoat people who challenge the dogmas of your tribe. So whether it's a church, which says, we have fried chicken on Sunday and you come in bringing in tofu and you get socially shunned. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's for some reason Zoom kicked me out, but I can still hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can see you and hear you.
That's weird, man. I don't know what's going on here. I might have.
Can you see me?
No, I cannot. They're asking me to sign back in. So let me see if I can remember my password. Okay. Because usually I still see you.
So you're in this one. You're logged into this one.
So usually I'm automatically, I don't know what's going on here.
It says it's still recording too. So hopefully it won't be lost.
Yeah. I just got to figure out where the page went. Let's click that off and turn this off. And all right, I have no idea what's happening here. Okay. Let's see. There, I can see you again. Okay.
Can you see me?
Yeah, that was absolutely just one of the oddest things I've dealt with on Zoom. So
where'd we leave off at? I don't know.
So we were talking, you were shit, I don't remember. That was just so weird.
Yeah.
That was just so odd. Well, let's kind of move. I had one more thing I wanted to touch on with you, and we've been going for a little bit over an hour anyway. So there's like one more thing I wanted to touch on, and then we'll do plugs and we'll call it a day, because this is just getting weird. You make you have commented several times on the moving forward, the progress, and to kind of embrace technology and utilize it for the good, and for people to get out there and think, like much like what you've been talking about this whole time, get out there and investigate and experiment and try to figure out good ways of using the technology moving forward. And one of the things I've heard from a lot of Orthodox priests is that you've seen the rise of Orthodox like inquirers and catechumens since social media, especially here recently. And we don't have to agree 100% with everything that goes on online with the Orthodox or Ortho bros, whatever you want to call these people, because I certainly don't. There are a lot of things I take issue with, but there are people that are utilizing technologies for the good and doing exactly what you're talking about. Maybe not exactly the same way you would imagine doing it, but can you get into like how AI might be utilized and perceived in such a way that would move forward a better vision for society and not allow this catastrophic end that everybody wants to sell us because fear sells and they got to do it to keep people tuning into their programs?
I don't really have much to say about AI. I don't know. I think about it. I'm still thinking about it. I had Cyprian on. He said it's demons. And I respected that position, and it made me step back and think about it more. I was neutral but negative leaning, and then he kind of moved me a little bit more negative, but then I'm still thinking about it. So I don't know. I think the way I look at it is I like the way Peter Thiel talks about we've had all this innovation in the world of bits, but hardly any innovation in the world of atoms, right? And so when I think of technology, I am just naturally more drawn towards how do we get innovation in the world of atoms? Okay, the world of atoms means a cure for diabetes that everybody can do without breaking the bank, a cure for a cancer, a cure for Alzheimer's. Imagine if in 2 years we can break through and start curing Alzheimer's and cancer like nothing. Let's have that kind of mind. Why don't we have that mindset in America? We've given up that frontier spirit, right? We've given that up and we've lost that. So I'm more focused on innovating in the world of atoms where I think we've been stagnating. And I think that this over emphasis on bits will actually correct itself once we start showing signs and wonders in the world of atoms. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think
so people are all crazy about AI, right?
Right.
And I'm like, well, if you go and create energy too cheap to meter and anti-gravity technology that we can not have to have tires changed and we can just float gently around without pollution from Saudi Arabia cartel oil or whatever, when we start to that changes so many different systems in our society.
Do you really think
it creates so much mimetic inertia towards atoms that I think people won't be so detached to the point where they need to rely on AI for all of their, like, the smart money and innovative minds will go towards atoms more when they start seeing that, oh, wow, the world of nature and atoms is still wide open. You know what I mean? Right now, everybody thinks it's kind of settled. This is about the best we can get with energy. We're just going to try to rearrange it in a more archaic way with solar and wind farms now because of our guilt. And we've got the best we can for medicine. We're just going to work for expensive patented new drugs that cost $60,000 a pop. It's all very awful. It's awful, bleak. Nothing's there. But I think if young people started seeing that there was actually these tremendous breakthroughs possible in the world of atoms, where people were building anti-gravity devices in their backyard like Henry Ford built a car, and people were curing cancer without having to spend hardly any money. And these things could start to be adapted. I think that more and more smart energy would go into those world of atoms, science, physics, engineering, chemistry, medicine. And I think the AI thing would kind of calibrate back into maybe under the dominion of a more atomistic, innovating world, and therefore a more incarnational Christianity.
Do you think do you think that because for a long time I've heard rumors that Nikola Tesla was on the verge of creating that energy that was so cheap, like you couldn't even measure it. Like it would have cost nothing for anybody. Do you think that? Do you have any knowledge about that, about what he was doing, about what he was experimenting with, and how close he was to developing that type of energy?
I'm not sure. I've heard things here and there. I'm not sure. He certainly isn't a great example of someone who was way ahead of his time, and we need to have 1,000 of those right now. See, I love the things that Elon Musk has done for good, for liberty. If he has going to keep, he's kind of a moderate, kind of plays both sides, but he's kind of like a Han Solo. To say you don't know, is he working for is he working for the rebels or the Empire? You don't really know, right? He's a dealer. He's kind of in between. And I'm thinking to myself though, but that's the best we have for our Tesla, is a guy who puts Tesla's name on a car that's using technology that's how old, how many decades old is the battery technology using? It's just being derivatively, developed, at a kind of incremental stage, as opposed to, we need real Galileos. We need them, and they should be sought after, and they should be nurtured and developed by people who love Jesus. because people who love Jesus with their heart, soul, and mind are going to have the courage to challenge the sacred cows of physics, of engineering, of chemistry, of cancer cures, and not worry about whether they lose their license, get arrested, get destroyed, get socially shunned. They're just going to move the ball forward. And that's what Jesus has asked us to do. And if we did
you're
that,
talking about a situation, of competing with usury, right? And these people would, like you say, completely be shunned. They would lose their licenses. They may even lose their lives, but that is the sacrifice that is required.
Right. Because the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. See, the power of the cross is saturating human history such that even those who are not Christian, when they see the sacrifices of those who will lay down their life and be shunned financially, socially, societally, and maybe physically killed or imprisoned, but for doing good things. That's how you win the heart. You know how you win over the hearts of the global warming cult? You create energy too cheap to meter and you go to prison for it. And you're a loving Jesus Christ the whole way through with your tongue and your life and your everything. You know what I'm saying? That's how you show, that's how you break that hardened heart of that cult. You see what I mean? That's how you start bringing the gospel, is when they're like, oh my goodness, that guy went to prison and that company got shut down and they had a better solution than stupid Klaus Schwab and his little wind farm. Like, wait a second. They're solving pollution better than those frauds, and their things don't cost as much, and they went to prison for it. That's how see, Jesus wants to work where people are.
Right.
That's why, he works with people where they're at. And so when you see, like, he's healing people's blindness, that's in the world of atoms. That's not the world of bits. Okay. When he's helping people catch a better fish, catch more fish. So he's increasing their yield. Yes. These are practical things that's the world of atoms. They ate that fish.
Yeah.
It's not this. See, that's what I'm saying. When we have so become Gnostic that even those who say they're Christian assume when we say do technology, they heard computers, apps, algorithms, AI, what's the other one? Bitcoin. It's all in the bits. But that means you're a product of your age. Think bigger than that. Go back to what Jesus did. And I'm not saying there's not a place for bits, but it's that idea technology and information technology is mind, and the atomistic technology is body, and they need to be harmonized together if we're Christians, right?
Right. Yeah.
See how it works? We have a disembodied theology that doesn't have an anthropology. So theology, let's say it again. Theology is the mind, and then anthropology is the body, right? And then we approach the Bible from a theology-only perspective without an anthropology. There we go again. We're getting a disembodied text, a disembodied Jesus. That's going to produce a culture that's saturated with disembodied technology, bits without any atoms. That's why atoms are stagnating. See how it all patterns together? It's beautiful when you see it. It makes perfect sense. As we get our anthropology and we get our incarnational action right, and that's going to inform our ability to more carefully disrupt and more boldly disrupt sacred cows holding us back in the world of material. And I can guarantee you this, that the folks that you think are lost and completely sold out to the gender mutilation camp or whatever, they will come to Christ when they see people who love Jesus fully perform signs and wonders. When the Einsteins and the Galileos of our culture are God-fearing Christians changing the game, then all the young kids will want to grow up to be those heroes. They'll want to grow up and emulate. What is it that makes them have this insight? It's Christ, right? And that's what opens up this opportunity for the knowledge of the Lord to fill the earth as the ocean is wet. As Habakkuk chapter 2 prophesied, and Jesus pulls into on the road into Jerusalem,
Yeah. Well, man, that's a great way to end. Like, you fire me up whenever you get going. So it's like a snowball rolling downhill, and I'm just like, I'm along for the ride, brother. Let's go. So
we have to have fellowship, and we have to talk about these things, and we have to be excited because there's so much to be excited about.
Yeah. I really appreciate you coming on. I hope we can do this again. Go ahead and plug whatever you got to plug, man.
Sure. I mean, whatever you guys want to listen to me, we're on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute. We have our website at neighborschoice.com. We have our podcast at David Gornoski, whatever podcast platform. And just most importantly, just get excited about what you can do. What are your talents? Write down a paper right now. Write down a list of the talents that you think that you've been gifted with by God, and then write down the areas that are your blind spots, and then work out how you can let those talents start to overwhelm those blind spots in a humble, concerted way. Look at those talents you have. You're a poet. You're a good listener. Maybe you're not. Whatever it is that you have, write those things down on a piece of paper and start mapping out. Then write down the people you know in your life. Write them down, the people you know, whether it's online or in your local community, and write down things that stand out about them, their attributes, their character, their things that you want to emulate, and their skill sets. And then look around you and write down areas that people have need in. Look at the things that America has need in and write those down. Write down, is it diseases that you're focusing on? Is it blight? Is it garbage nutrition in the food? Whatever it is, write those problems down around you that you see. Homelessness, right? Fatherlessness. And then line up your talent stack, the friends and people you know and their gifts, and then the problems, and see what you can do to start whittling out and challenging those problems. And then get to work. That's what you're supposed to do as a Christian all along. That's what we're all supposed to do.
Oh yeah, man. All right. Well, I really appreciate it. I'm gonna see if I can't salvage this. It's still acting kind of weird. So that's gonna be it though. I do appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we can do this again, man.
Yeah, no problem. Take care.
All right, brother. You have a good one. Okay. That disappeared. Get back to meeting.